I was standing in line at a packed Target, pushing a cart loaded with oversized organizational bins and an absurdly expensive scented candle I definitely didn't need. You know the vibe. It was a mundane Thursday evening, the kind where the store smells like roasted nuts and absolute suburban monotony. The cashier was just scanning my stuff, the barcode reader beeping in a steady, hypnotic rhythm, when my phone vibrated intensely in my jacket pocket. It was my brother, Marcus. He sent me a text containing 6 words that completely shattered my reality. "You're out of the wedding," followed immediately by, "It's only for real family." No emojis. No long-winded explanation, just a digital slap to the face. At first, I genuinely thought it was some kind of sick prank. Marcus had always been the golden boy, but lately he was acting more entitled than a spoiled sister during prom season. But to actually get uninvited? It made 0 sense. I hadn't even done anything wrong. We hadn't argued. In fact, we hadn't spoken more than a quick hello in over 3 weeks because I was so busy managing his financial mess. But then, my thumb hovered over the screen, and I opened the massive family group chat, the one that included our cousins, our parents, our aunts, and a few of his groomsmen. I scrolled up and saw the brutal messages that had just poured in. One of his annoying frat bro buddies sent a laughing skull emoji. Then Marcus added, "Let's keep the drama out of my big weekend. She's just not really part of our inner circle anymore." My cousin Sarah piped up, "Wait, didn't she literally just drop thousands on your venue deposit?" Marcus fired back without missing a beat. "Yeah, but I'm returning her money. She can take her pathetic charity elsewhere." More laughing emojis cascaded down my screen. I waited. I watched the typing bubbles pop up and disappear, but no one said a single word in my defense. Not my mom, not my dad, nobody. I stood there, staring at my glowing screen, as if my pure rage could somehow melt the glass. My brain misfired, unable to process the absolute audacity of the situation. I had always been his designated safety net. I covered his rent when he partied too hard in college and lost his job. I co-signed his first decent apartment lease. I bailed him out when he maxed out 3 different bank accounts just last year, and I never, ever asked for a single penny back. For this exact event, I had already drained my savings to cover 50% of the high-end banquet hall, the live band, and every single ridiculous custom decoration because he claimed he was broke and stressed. He looked me in the eye 6 weeks ago and swore I was the only person he could rely on, and now, out of nowhere, I wasn't considered good enough to attend. I didn't scream. I didn't drop my phone. I calmly looked at the cashier, said, "I'm so sorry. I have to go," abandoned my cart right there at Register 4, and walked out into the chilly night air. I didn't storm out of the parking lot. I didn't peel out in a fit of blind rage or violently lay on my horn. Instead, I drove back to my place in absolute, terrifying silence. It was the kind of heavy, pressurized quiet that makes your ears pop when a commercial flight abruptly takes off. The glow of the city streetlights blurred into long, fiery streaks of amber and white against my windshield, but internally my mind was operating with crystal clarity. I walked inside, dropped my keys on the counter, and sat down on my dark leather recliner, the exact piece of furniture Marcus used to mock for being too old school and safe. I pulled out my phone and bypassed all social media, tapping directly into my banking app. I scrolled back through the months of records. I wasn't just looking at numbers, I was gathering undeniable evidence. Evidence of every single instance where I had played the role of the ultimate fixer, the emergency fund, the blindly loyal sibling. I began taking meticulous screenshots. I didn't just capture the bare transactions. I dug deep into my email and pulled the formal, itemized invoices, the legally binding documents prominently displaying my name on the Bill 2 line, and his event details securely on the line below. Then, I navigated back to the active group chat. It was still a toxic cesspool of activity. Several extended relatives were firing off animated gifs of reality stars, casually sipping tea, absolutely reveling in the unfolding mess. They honestly pictured me sobbing uncontrollably into a pillow. They envisioned me completely humiliated and broken. What they didn't realize was that I was currently operating with the ruthless, icy precision of a forensic accountant auditing a massive corporate fraud case. I typed out my response. Perfect. Then real family can figure out how to cover their own expensive bills. I didn't pause for a reaction or wait for someone to type back. I systematically started attaching the PDF files, letting them render slowly one by one so the notification alerts would go off like rapid gunfire on their devices. Premium catering invoice, $18,500. Exclusive DJ package, $4,200. Custom florist installations, $9,600. Photography retainer, $3,500. I fired off the images consecutively, ensuring the green paid stamps were glaringly obvious right next to the last 4 digits of my credit card. And then came the sequence of actions that felt remarkably like pulling a loaded trigger. I started contacting the vendors. Since it was past regular business hours, I left an assertive, recorded voicemail for the entertainment company. But the gourmet food provider had a comprehensive online management portal. I logged in, navigated to our specific reservation, and located the bright red Cancel Event button. The system prompted a stern warning about losing non-refundable deposits. I didn't flinch. I clicked Confirm. For the floral arrangements, I drafted a direct, formal email to the owner, a sophisticated gentleman named Mr. Olaide Eze. Sterling, who I had met with 4 separate times to accommodate Marcus's absurd obsession with imported white orchids. Please terminate the entire order immediately, I typed out. The financial backing for this event has been officially withdrawn. I canceled every single one of them. One by one, the message notifications lit up, but the true panic hadn't set in just yet. At first, there was just arrogant mockery. Marcus sent a text saying, "Wow, bitter much." His groomsman posted a stupid internet meme about broke siblings trying to flex, which made absolutely zero sense considering I was the sole financier of the weekend. They were completely convinced I was bluffing, assuming I was just making noise for attention. But by the time the sun came up, the entire atmosphere had violently shifted. The heart icons and laughing reactions had vanished into thin air. They were finally realizing that when the human ATM casually walks away, the extravagant party violently grinds to a halt. When I woke up the next morning, my phone displayed 87 unread messages. I didn't rush to read them. Instead, I padded barefoot into my kitchen, the hardwood floors cold and grounding against my skin, and brewed a rich pot of dark roast coffee. I cracked the window above the sink, letting the crisp morning air roll in, smelling of damp earth and incoming rain. I felt a profound, chilling calmness. It was the kind of absolute stillness that only settles into your bones after someone permanently flips a switch inside your chest, a switch that can never, ever be reset. Finally, sitting down with my warm mug, I opened the group chat. The tone had drastically flipped overnight. The smugness was replaced by a frantic, jagged desperation. "You're kidding, right? You seriously canceled the vendors?" Marcus wrote. "That's unimaginably low, even for you." Then our mother jumped in, her messages arriving in a rapid-fire stream of pure, unadulterated guilt-tripping. "You need to fix this immediately. This is your brother's massive milestone. He was stressed out. He didn't mean to make you feel uninvited. You don't destroy a family gathering out of spite." I read that specific line twice. Out of spite. I hadn't screamed or thrown a tantrum. I hadn't insulted his appearance. I simply turned off the endless money tap that I never should have opened in the first place. Then Marcus sent a message that inadvertently revealed his true mindset. "You were always jealous I was settling down first. You never wanted this to happen for me." I realized then that he didn't just view me as a disposable backup plan. He had genuinely cast me as the jealous villain in his own twisted fantasy world. I left him on read. A few hours later, my father called. He is a man who typically communicates entirely through stoic grunts and curt nods. So, when his caller ID popped up, I naively thought someone might finally recognize the sheer injustice of the situation. I was wrong. He didn't ask how I was coping with the drama. He asked if I was still holding a grudge about a car loan from 3 years ago. I bluntly reminded him this wasn't about an old fight. It was about being treated like an outsider while funding the entire spectacle. He exhaled a long, heavy sigh of disappointment. "You're being petty. You're embarrassing us." I didn't utter a single syllable. I just hung up the phone. They were obsessively worried about the optics, but they had no idea I was quietly preparing something far more permanent. That evening, I sent one final text to the family thread. Just a single, ominous sentence to let them know the game wasn't over yet. "Wait for your wedding gift," nobody replied. Not a single typing bubble appeared. They were probably all huddled in my parents' living room right then, sipping cheap wine and whispering about me, branding me as the crazy, bitter sister. But I wasn't sitting around my kitchen island feeling sorry for myself or shedding any tears. I was meticulously working on a counterstrike that would be infinitely more permanent. See, Marcus had completely forgotten a crucial piece of our shared history. He forgot that we used to share a cramped downtown apartment, that I knew all his default passcodes, that I had spent years scrubbing his messes clean before our parents could find out. And most importantly, he forgot about last New Year's Eve, the night I accidentally walked into the guest room looking for a stray phone charger and caught him red-handed, passionately making out with someone who was definitely not his sweet bride-to-be, Emily. It was Chloe, his manipulative ex-girlfriend from his fraternity days, the exact woman he swore he had permanently excised from his life. And I had a high-definition video. I hadn't intentionally set out to record them. I had been fumbling in the pitch-black hallway, trying to swipe to my phone's flashlight, and my thumb accidentally opened the camera app, hitting record instead. The visual was admittedly a little shaky, shot through a slight 2-inch crack in the doorframe, but the audio was crystal clear. You could hear him whispering promises to her, completely disregarding his impending marriage. I had tucked that file away in a hidden, locked folder at the time, deeply uncomfortable, convincing myself it wasn't my place to detonate his life. But right now this blatant cheating was very much my business. I didn't utter a single word for the rest of that week. I just let them all stew in their own mounting anxiety. Marcus started posting vague, passive-aggressive Instagram stories about removing toxic energy and protecting his aura. A few of our easily manipulated aunts reshared his posts, aggressively adding praying hands emojis. Despite the absolute financial ruin I'd inflicted, the ceremony was apparently still moving forward. He had desperately scraped together some budget replacements, probably a generic audio playlist instead of a professional entertainer, and cheap supermarket carnations, but the grand show was still firmly on schedule, and I was going to be there. The main event was set for Saturday afternoon at a rustic rented barn venue about 2 hours outside the city limits. Technically, I was still uninvited, but I knew for a fact they wouldn't have hired actual bouncers or security to check IDs at the gravel driveway entrance. It was an open-air, farm-style setup. Marcus probably assumed I wouldn't dare show my face after all the spectacular drama I had caused earlier in the week. That was his fatal miscalculation. I arrived wearing a muted charcoal midi dress, nothing flashy, just understated enough to completely blend into the rustic barn aesthetic of the venue. Inside a small, ivory envelope, I left a simple greeting card in the wooden gift box near the entrance. It just read, "Hope you enjoy the memories." I remained hidden in the back row, standing quietly near the exit. My parents, grandparents, and the rest of our relatives were comfortably seated up front. Marcus stood beneath a hastily constructed wooden archway wrapped in cheap fake ivy. You could practically smell the budget replacement catering from the back of the room, and the awful generic playlist they used to replace the live DJ was faintly echoing through the speakers. Yet, he was smiling widely, trying to look like a wealthy, in-control groom, despite knowing he couldn't just swipe a credit card to fix the massive holes in his event. Emily, his bride, looked genuinely beautiful. She was nervous, her hands shaking slightly, holding her bouquet, but visibly happy. Watching her, I actually felt a deep, sharp pang of sympathy. She was a sweet girl who was completely oblivious to the fraud she was about to tie her life to. When the officiant cleared his throat to begin the most critical part of the ceremony, the vows, I slowly pulled out my smartphone. I already had the hidden footage queued up and ready on my screen. It was exactly 18 seconds of undeniable truth. Marcus's voice echoing in the dark hallway, Chloe's hands wrapped tightly around his neck, as he laughed and whispered, "Emily is just a safety net. I don't feel the same spark with her." I hit send. It arrived just like a regular text, but the payload was catastrophic. The file blasted out to every single aunt, uncle, cousin, and most importantly, directly to Emily's phone. I was finally stepping down from my exhausting role as the blindly compliant sister, proving I was the only real family willing to show her the brutal truth. I watched the precise second Emily felt the vibration against her hip. Marcus noticed the shift in her posture instantly. His confident grin twitched, short-circuiting like a dying light bulb. She pulled out her phone right in the middle of the quiet barn. So did my mother. Then my uncle. Then Sarah. A wave of confused murmurs rippled through the wooden pews. Dozens of screens started lighting up like scattered fireflies trapped in the dim, late afternoon shadows. Emily held up her trembling hand, abruptly stopping the efficient mid-sentence. She turned directly to Marcus. She whispered something completely inaudible to the breathless crowd and violently shoved the glowing screen right into his face. All the color completely drained from his cheeks. He frantically tried to snatch the device from her hands, but she sharply yanked it back. Then he looked past her white veil, his panicked eyes frantically scanning the sea of confused guests until they locked directly onto me, standing motionless in the shadows. That was my cue. I stepped out of the darkness and began walking down the center aisle, marching straight toward the altar. I didn't yell. I didn't shed a tear. I just let the silence stretch over the vineyard. This rustic wedding was about to permanently crash. "You all need to fully understand who my brother actually is," I said, my voice cutting cleanly through the stunned, suffocating silence of the barn. Nobody moved a muscle. Nobody dared to interrupt. Marcus didn't even attempt to speak. He just stood there, completely paralyzed, his jaw practically on the floor, seemingly incapable of deciding which fake emotion to deploy first. And then, absolute chaos erupted. Marcus violently lunged in my direction, nearly knocking the poor, confused officiant entirely off the raised platform. He was screaming absolute nonsense, a barrage of threats, furious slurs, and wild accusations. I couldn't even decipher over the sudden uproar of the crowd. But before his hands could even graze my shoulder, Emily physically stepped between us. She didn't cower. She grabbed his arm with a surprising, fierce strength. He immediately turned his aggression toward her, which was a monumental mistake, because Emily didn't flinch. She didn't scream back. She just stood there, her face set like stone, gripping his wrist as if he were some pathetic stranger who had just tried to pickpocket her on a subway train. Her voice was terrifyingly calm as she asked him a simple, devastating question. "Is this true?" The confident, arrogant groom instantly dissolved. Marcus started sobbing. It wasn't a neat, cinematic cry. It was a desperate, ugly, red-faced panic. He kept stuttering. "I'm so sorry, Em," claiming it was a momentary lapse, pleading that it didn't mean anything to him. But Emily had already stopped looking at his face. Her eyes were glued back onto her phone, replaying the damning video. The undeniable proof. She didn't wait for him to finish his pathetic, groveling speech. She simply dropped his hand, turned around, and walked away. She didn't just walk off the altar, she marched completely out of the barn, directly to her parked sedan, and drove off, leaving the engine roar echoing across the shocked venue. Marcus collapsed dramatically onto the rough wooden floorboards, still aggressively weeping into his hands. Our mother immediately scrambled out of the front pew, rushing over to coddle him, while a few bewildered groomsmen awkwardly hovered nearby. In the midst of the wreckage, not a single person approached me. I quietly turned around, walked back out to my car, and drove away without glancing in the rearview mirror. I didn't need to witness the immediate fallout. The real tragedy had already concluded. On the drive back into the city, I decisively turned off my cell phone. When I finally powered it back on later that night, I was fully bracing myself for an explosive firestorm. What actually hit me was a strange, suffocating kind of quiet chaos, the specific kind of tension that somehow feels vastly heavier than actual screaming. I had 42 missed calls, predominantly from my mom, and a handful from unknown numbers, likely cousins trying to feign a neutral diplomatic stance. The family group chat had morphed into an active digital war zone. Some relatives were still replaying the video in shock, furiously typing underneath it as if it were a scandalous Reddit thread. Uncle Ray typed, "This is an absolute disgrace." Cousin Sarah fired back, "I always knew there was something sketchy about him. He tried to message his ex-girlfriend behind Emily's back before." My dad finally chimed in, "But it wasn't to condemn the cheating. We will not tolerate this kind of public humiliation in our circle." That was the real issue for them. Not the lies, not the betrayal, not the unpaid invoices from the florist that I had to meticulously manage. No, their problem was that my actions had exposed the family's flawless facade, delivering a brutal dose of karma they weren't ready to face. By the next morning, the digital chaos faded into a deafening silence. Then, the private messages began trickling in. "You made your point. Enough is enough. I hope you're happy. You destroyed his life." They were fiercely circling the wagons around Marcus. Then came the final, devastating blow from my mother. "We're not sure we want you at Thanksgiving this year. Things are too raw." I stared at that message for an eternity. After all the financial manipulation, after he used me like a disposable asset, I was the one being pushed out. So, I typed a single reply. "Don't worry, I won't be there." I permanently left the group, blocked his number, and fully expected to be cut off. The weeks following the shattered vows were eerily quiet. Nobody reached out. It was a strange, isolating peace. I spent Thanksgiving entirely alone, eating takeout sushi on my couch, watching obscure historical documentaries. I began to realize how much of my identity was inherently tied to being the family problem solver. Without that role, I was lost. I even looked up some options for therapy, realizing I needed professional help to untangle the toxic dynamic I had unknowingly sustained for decades. December arrived swiftly, bringing frosty mornings and bright holiday lights strung over suburban roofs, completely oblivious to my internal shift. I hadn't received a single message, not even a generic holiday forward. I had been quietly, surgically cut off from the family portrait. I found an old shoebox of childhood photos matching pajamas, silly beach trips. I sat on my living room floor, staring at those sunburned faces, wondering if any of it was ever genuine. Sometimes, the universe delivers a harsh karma that forces you to rebuild yourself. This wasn't just the bitter end of a sibling rivalry, it was the death of a lifelong illusion. I put the box away. I didn't burn them, because I was finally finding my own peace. I firmly acknowledged that I needed to lean into my real therapy sessions to effectively move forward without them. Shortly after the new year began, an email from Marcus unexpectedly landed in my inbox. The subject line was blank. There was no greeting, no apology, just a dense wall of defensiveness. He claimed I had always made him feel inferior, that he struggled growing up in my shadow, and that I blew up his entire life out of pure spite. He didn't express a single ounce of remorse for his actions. He only complained about how I made him look to everyone else. He stated that his ex was a mistake, but I was the one who ruined his future. I stared at the screen, recognizing the heavy irony. He was accusing me of making him feel like a nobody, which was exactly how he had treated me for years. I didn't reply. I simply archived the message and permanently blocked his address. That was the last time he ever tried to reach out. About a week later, I received a phone call from an unknown number. It was Emily. My chest tightened, but her voice wasn't angry. She simply said, "Thank you." She explained that she had watched the footage over and over, finally understanding the subtle red flags she had previously ignored: his distant behavior, his sudden mood swings, his aggressive deflections. She had packed her bags, broken their shared lease, and moved out of state to stay with close friends in Colorado. "I don't know who I was about to marry," she murmured, "but I'm so incredibly glad I didn't." She asked how I was holding up, and for the first time in months, someone genuinely cared about my answer. I told her I felt empty, but a good kind of empty, like a room cleared of heavy, broken furniture, waiting to be repainted. She shared a thought that I will always carry with me. Sometimes you lose people who were never truly on your side to begin with. I started attending professional counseling sessions that January, not because I felt shattered, but because I needed to deconstruct the decades I spent acting as his personal savior. My counselor asked me a profound question that hit me right in the chest. What validation are you still waiting for him to give you? It took me a long time to realize that I was already enough without having to be constantly useful to someone else. I hear through the grapevine that Marcus is currently sharing a tiny apartment with his ex, working a miserable job he hates. I don't wish him harm, but I also don't wish him well. I just don't consider him my sibling anymore. It's not about revenge. It's about finally finding my own quiet serenity.